If you are playing DFS this week, you are in the right place. This is everything you need to know that'll help you win in week 7. And we could begin with arguably the best play on the slate. He's going to be picking up some ownership, a good amount of it, but it's $7,000 flat, Kenneth Walker against Arizona. And now the fact that he's $7,000 flat, the flat price principle, it's going to give him a little bit of an ownership discount just by human psychology, not thinking they're getting a price discount here. Now last week, Kenneth Walker saw a season high in usage. You can see from my tweet right here, 76% of the snaps, and look at this, 86% of the carries. Both of those were season highs. Coming out of the bye week, he easily held off the rookie Zach Charbonnet. And now he's in the best spot of the week this week because he's a 7.5 point favorite, 8 point favorite in some spots against the Cardinals, bottom 3 run defense. They've given up the most explosive plays this season. And last week against Kyren Williams, allowed 158 rushing yards, 7.9 yards per carry. Running backs in similar spots against similar opponents average over 16 fantasy points a game this year. Yes, Kenneth Walker is a great play. And now another great play coming in with modest to low ownership is Davante Adams right now at $8,200. And it makes sense. Look, Keenan Allen's in a great matchup at $8,600. Amon-Ra St. Brown continues to produce every single week. And then you have the other top receivers in Stephon Diggs and Cooper Kupp. Not a lot of people are looking Davante Adams' way. He hasn't been producing as of late, and he's been frustrated, just 9 targets the past 2 weeks. So that's why maybe you're seeing some lower ownership. And you can see that from this underdog tweet. Davante Adams growing frustrated with seemingly diminished role in the offense. And now Jimmy G is hurt. Aiden O'Connell, a rookie, is going to have to step up. But all of this is kind of a squeaky wheel narrative. Maybe he's force-fed some targets. And when Aiden O'Connell started earlier this season, he actually targeted Davante 13 times and 5 times in the red zone in that game. I think he's a nice lower owned option. Another lower owned stud relative to the guys around him is Saquon Barkley at $8,100. People are going down to the $7,000 range for Josh Jacobs, and a Kenneth Walker makes sense, or they're going up to Austin Eckler, priced around Saquon but in a better game environment. I think Saquon at like 7% ownership or lower right now in the DFS blueprint is a nice option because he returned from injury last week and he basically proved that, yeah, he's not going to have that many lingering effects from this high ankle like he did a couple years back because he had 28 touches on 29 opportunities. He wasn't overly efficient, but he was efficient in the second half. He actually got stronger as the game went on against the good Bills defense because he started the game 12 carries, 12 yards. After that, he picks up his next 12 carries for 81 yards. And now he's going to find himself in a nice matchup against the Commanders. And in 3 starts so far this season, Saquon has seen 16 opportunities, 24 opportunities, and 29 opportunities. So Saquon's a solid play, and so is Mike Evans, who also is not coming in with a ton of ownership at a fair price point of $7,100. The matchup is, I would say, fine for what Mike Evans' skill set is. And last week he had a bad game, his first bad game of the year when he's been healthy, just 8.9 points. But he still had a team high 10 targets. He's averaging 9.3 targets per game, and he was just missed on a 92-yard. Would have been a walk-in touchdown on a broken play if the ball wasn't tipped and intercepted at the line of scrimmage. So you get a day when people are looking at the game logs and just looking at the analysis, oh, just 4 catches for 49 yards. But I'm looking at, okay, that was a tough matchup. He still had a big day. He dropped a 25-yard pass in this game as well. He had 10 targets. I'll go to him at lower ownership. He's been great in terms of earning volume this season. And now we're going to get into a sneaky wide receiver at a cheap price point. But by the way, there's over 70% of people who watch these videos that aren't subscribed. So make sure, maybe you forgot this is a newer DFS channel from the beginning of last year, to hit the subscribe button. As we move on into the videos, it'll allow you to see my future content. Now that cheaper and maybe sneakier wide receiver is going to be a $4,400 Kendrick Bourne, who has now played in 2 games where Juju Smith-Schuster has not been out there and healthy. And in those games, he's been great. In week 1, he had 24.5 fantasy points on 11 targets. And in week 6, he had 19.3 fantasy points on 11 targets. He was a top 10 wide receiver in each of those weeks without Juju Smith-Schuster. And now the Patriots are home 9-point underdogs against the Bills. They're probably going to have to throw 35 plus times in this game. Kendrick Bourne's a nice cheap option. Now another wide receiver that I've loved all season long has been Zay Flowers. He's just $5,700, but this is a sneaky difficult matchup against the Lions secondary. And here's the thing, according to the DFS blueprint, Zay Flowers is picking up right now like 20% ownership. And it kind of makes sense because all the rookie is doing is earning volume. He's earned at least 25% of the targets in all but 1 game this season. He's currently top 15 in wide receiver usage, and we finally saw him find the end zone last week. And he's got the wide receiver cheat codes for fantasy. Your downfield targets, he has 8 of those, 16th most, and your red zone targets that obviously lead to touchdown chances, well, he has 7 of those, so his 15 total cheat code targets ranks top 8 amongst receivers. But my concern as of right now is, can he pay off this price tag, especially given the ownership? And I'm just going to lean with no. I'll go somewhere else, especially in that price range with some other options right now. Now, speaking of highly owned players, Travis Kelce is going to be highly owned this week, but I currently don't think he's high enough owned. He should probably be close to like 30% owned with the guys who are on bye this week. He's $8,000. He is over $2,000 more than anybody else, but it makes sense because in my projections in the DFS blueprint right now, he's projected for 7 more points than any other tight end. The best game environment at nearly 28 points on a week where there's not a lot of good game environments. The Chiefs by far have the best team total. So I think that he is somebody I want to be targeting. And if I want to target him, well then yeah, Patrick Mahomes comes into play. We talked about that team total. As you can see right here, it opened at 26.5 points. It was the second highest on the week, the highest on this slate though. It's now since risen risen to 27.5 to 28 points. It's actually now the highest on the slate, even more than that Miami and Philadelphia Eagles game. So Patrick Mahomes, yes, he's in play. You get the cheap options in Rashee Rice with an increasing role. MVS continues to be out there. Sky Moore should see some more usage without Justin Watson. That kind of makes this expensive stack come together for you. And another way to make it come together for you is to get a flat minimum running back. But is that the best idea? Because that's what you're getting in the Rams backfield. A couple of $4,000 running backs in Zack Evans, and you have Royce Freeman. Look, Ronnie Rivers is on IR, the backup running back. Kyren Williams won't be playing this week. So you're getting Zack Evans, Royce Freeman, and even Myles Gaskin was signed. Evans has been ahead of Freeman the past couple of weeks. Freeman's been on the practice squad. Evans was active last week. So maybe you assume that means he's ahead of him, the 6th-round rookie. And for a little bit of background on Evans, this is what he did when he transferred to Ole Miss for his final year of college. Between his rushing and receiving yards, a little over 1,000 yards. Look, he wasn't that great of a pass catcher. He only had 30 catches in 27 games, but he averaged nearly 7 yards per carry in college. So he knew how to, pick up chunks on the ground. The concern that you might have is the fact that this team has added a lot of running backs. They signed Royce Freeman from their practice squad, but it makes sense because they're down 2 running backs, right? It's going to be Ronnie Rivers and Kyren Williams hurt, so they have to replace those guys. They picked up Darrell Henderson, who's not listed here in the Adam Schefter tweet. Maybe there's a reason for that, but look at this name. Myles Gaskin is interesting. Now, he's not somebody that I'm going to go out of my way to play in DFS, but he's probably the closest you can get to like a Kyren Williams replacement in terms of his pass catching ability, and even somewhat, not great, but somewhat the pass protection, at least related to Zack Evans, who's not much of a pass catcher. So when I see Zack Evans at $4,000 flat, he's a popular waiver ad, so that usually correlates with, will this guy be used in fantasy and DFS this week? He's picking up a lot of ownership. I'm staying away from that. Now, am I staying away from Josh Jacobs? He's $7,400. I do prefer Kenneth Walker. I honestly like Saquon Barkley at lower ownership, but there's no doubt the #1 usage running back in all of football right now, Josh Jacobs, is definitely in play. And yeah, he is #1 in usage. Look at this role. He's 3rd in carries, 1st in running back targets, Josh Jacobs of all people, and now he has Aiden O'Connell, who targeted him a bunch the last time that he started, and yeah, 3rd in red zone touches. There's a lot of upside in this role. It's a bad offensive line. Because of that, he hasn't been all that efficient this season, but he's still seeing 24 opportunities a game. And now he's in one of the best matchups you can find. Yeah, he's on the road with a rookie quarterback, but he faces the Bears' bottom 5 run defense. So I'm interested in Josh Jacobs, but I'm really interested in this next wide receiver. Puka Nacua finds himself at a really nice price point of $7,600. He's kind of right in the middle there. People are either going to go up and pay for your Amon-Ra St. Browns or the elite receivers, or maybe go down a little bit and try and find some value. I think Puka Nacua is a nice play because of a couple of things here. People are down on him after he had a bad week last week, but so far with Cooper Kupp through 2 games, his role has been elite. More specifically, that role is 98% of the snaps, 100% of the routes run, and earning 29% of the targets. For context here, 29% of the targets would have ranked borderline top 5 amongst receivers last season. But Puka only had 6.5 fantasy points last week because Matthew Stafford only threw the ball 24 times instead of his average 37 attempts per game this season. I think he's going to bounce back, especially this week, because this week he gets a Steelers secondary that ranks bottom 10 in the NFL. Now, they are coming off of the bye week, but still bottom 10 in the NFL, and you're getting a Rams team that might be forced to throw the ball more this week than they were last week against the Cardinals. And because of everything we just said, it makes me interested in Matthew Stafford's stacks. We talked about Mahomes stacks, Matthew Stafford stacks, also expensive with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, but if you can find a way to double stack it, maybe you get another cheaper option, a Tutu Atwell in there, I like these options. And the reason why I think it's nice is the Rams have a nice team total. 23.5 points for this week is one of the better ones on the week, and they're facing Pittsburgh, who's coming off the bye week. Kenny Pickett is now healthier. Deontay Johnson is expected to return, so you would think that their offense can maybe keep the game close, keep it competitive, means more fueled pass attempts for the Rams. And now, speaking of teams and players coming off of the bye week, let's get into this next tight end. And that tight end's name is Luke Musgrave of the Green Bay Packers, who's maybe been a letdown based on him being like a sleeper in fantasy for season-long leagues. But look at this. He's just 3,300. He now faces the Denver Broncos, who we know their defense stinks. The Packers are coming off of a bye, and let's look at what he's done recently. And look, for a rookie tight end, his usage has been pretty damn good. He started his career 3 weeks in a row of 80% or more of the routes. That's something that like only 10 tight ends on the season will do. And in week 3, he sees 8 targets, a season high, but then he gets hurt in week 4. Week 5, he returns somewhat limited, but he still sees 71% of the routes and earns 7 targets. So his last 2 healthy-ish games, he's earned 15 targets. And now he's coming out of the bye week, where typically rookies will see a larger role, and this offense definitely needs to get their playmakers involved. So Musgrave's a nice cheap option. Now, an affordable option who's not picking up a ton of ownership because of a tough matchup, most likely, is $6,600 Michael Pittman, who got back on track last week. Pittman ended up going over 100 yards on 14 targets. He had the more pocket-friendly quarterback in Gardner Minshew back there, and Minshew will be there for the rest of the year because Anthony Richardson is now done for the season. Pretty quietly this season, Michael Pittman has been elite at earning targets. He has the 4th most targets on the year. He's earning 28% of his team's targets, and his targets have actually been more accurate in his time with Gardner Minshew. This is nice at a modest ownership. Now, before we keep going, I have to let you know about the DFS blueprint, because every single day of the week, I'll be sending you a specific tool and multiple tools depending on the day of the week. I mean, you could screenshot this, you can pause it, you can look at everything, the game-by-game matchup notes, the Sunday-only Patreon strategy show, the props tool, the projections, rankings, ownership, everything you need, showdown information to win whatever slate you're playing on, increase your odds of winning. Here's just a fraction of one of the things you get. The game-by-game matchup notes. This is a past one filtered by wide receivers. You can see their cornerback wide receiver matchup, the weight, the speed advantage, what that wide receiver has done, what that cornerback has done. Every single fantasy relevant DFS wide receiver on the slate will have a matchup, and this will be translated to every other position as well. Now, the DFS blueprint is very simple to get. You just scan the QR code on the screen, or you click the link in the description below to join the thousands of people who currently have access and are using it this week to win more. All right, now we get back to the program, and we talked about some of the Steelers players earlier. George Pickens at 5,500. He had a great game, 130 yards, a touchdown, and that was against a Ravens good secondary before the bye week. Then the bye week comes. Now Deontay Johnson's returning. Yes, George Pickens has a little bit of steam coming off of his sails. And there's no doubt for the rest of the season, his target share will diminish, but week by week, he'll have some big upside weeks, and the weeks I want to target him is when he's lower owned like this game. So Pickens is intriguing to me, and now a guy who's going to be like 1 or 2% owned who's really intriguing to me is Jerry Jeudy. We all just saw him on primetime last week get clowned on Thursday Night Football by Steve Smith. He ends up not producing. They keep saying they want to trade the guy. I get this, but don't you think this is going to be maybe the most motivated he's ever been? And now he gets a Packers secondary that, yeah, Jair Alexander is solid, but he hasn't been shadowing players this year. And outside of Jair Alexander, this secondary has been beatable. So a 1% Jerry Jeudy is at least interesting to me. Just a week before that, he led the team with a 25% target share. And I'm also interested in this running back right here, Isaiah Pacheco of the Chiefs, who has a great matchup against the Chargers. Over the last 3 games, we're seeing an elite role from Pacheco. He's seen over 70% of the rush attempts. It's the best 3-game stretch of his career, and he's been more efficient this season, which is probably fueling the reasoning as to why he's seeing more touches. He is right now 18th in yards per touch, 5 yards per touch, but he was efficient there last year. It's mostly the receiving game. He's top 5 in running back receiving efficiency this year. And now he's in the best game environment as a nearly 6-point favorite against the Chargers, and the Chargers have a bottom 5 run defense. Everything for Isaiah Pacheco continues to be good. He's picking up modest ownership, but for me right now, it's fine. Now, this next running back isn't picking up all that much ownership, and it makes him a nice leverage play. And that would be Jerome Ford, who's just $5,100 this week. So he's very affordable on a week where maybe you want to play some expensive quarterbacks and expensive stacking options, Kelsey and Mahomes, maybe a Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Matthew Stafford, those types of stacks. This can get you there because he's facing a Colts team that is beatable on the ground. And Jerome Ford, look, I believe Kareem Hunt is more involved, and that's what we've seen. Hunt saw season high usage last week. He was efficient on that, but very quietly, Jerome Ford saw a good amount of usage. It was only 11 fantasy points, but it was a brutal matchup against the 49ers, and he turns 19 overall touches into 91 yards. So this was a solid, I would say, performance from him, averaging about 5 yards per touch. And now this week, he's lower owned as a 3-point favorite. It's an interesting spot to target. And so is the $7,300 Bejan Robinson, who after really the last couple of weeks not having a massive game, people are getting concerned, but in my opinion, they're overreacting, and people are now over-owning, in my opinion, some guys around him. Kenneth Walker picking up a lot of ownership, probably not over-owned. Josh Jacobs maybe a little bit over-owned compared to Bejan Robinson. But like I said, this is overreaction. Bejan Robinson still saw 18 touches last week, still had the elite passing game role of 5 catches for 43 yards, nearly 10 points in the air alone. Yeah, he didn't get it down on the ground, but that's going to happen from time to time. We just saw that last week with some other key running backs like Breece Hall and DeAndre Swift, and they still had strong weeks. We're still going to get 16 to 18 plus touches, red zone work and passing game work for Bejan Robinson, who's now coming in lower owned. A player who's not lower owned and might end up being the highest owned player on the slate is going to be Keenan Allen. Now, his price tag might keep him a little bit lower owned than some other options on this slate, but look, he's just a volume hog. He's a 6-point underdog in the best game environment on the week, which could be a potential shootout between the Chiefs and the Chargers. Obviously, he's going to be owned. And as you can see right here, he's earning over 30% of his team's targets to target share, and 37% of the time that he runs a route, he's being targeted by Justin Herbert. That's crazy. Now, in 10 similar spots in his career with Justin Herbert when he's a touchdown underdog, he averages 10 targets and over 17 fantasy points, and that's with Mike Williams in some of those games. Yeah, he's a nice run back option. And that makes his quarterback a nice option because his quarterback is in the dream spot. As a 5 to 6 point underdog, a slight underdog or so, you can see right here the Chargers have a 21-point team total. They'll have to throw to keep up. Probably a 40-plus attempt game for Justin Herbert. Profiles out as a potential spot to have a 300-yard performance and multiple touchdowns. That is yet again another potential expensive stack, so you need some moderately to cheap priced options to make it work. Now, a potential moderately priced wide receiver that you can build your lineup around as your most expensive would be Chris Godwin at $6,900 if you're trying to come off of the expensive tier of Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, that whole range, because he's seen 18 targets the last 2 games, and this offense has been able to move the ball. I would prefer his teammate Mike Evans for $200 more, but if you don't have that money, Chris Godwin is, quote unquote, the best way to say it, he's due. He has 7 red zone targets this year, top 10 in the NFL, and 0 receiving touchdowns. That's going to change at some point, potentially even this week. Now let's talk about some other potential quarterbacks you can stack here. You have Josh Allen. Now my concern with Josh Allen, I like him. Nice team total of 25 points. Good matchup against against the Patriots, but as an 8-point favorite, do we think the Patriots can fuel a close game? They've been blown out plenty of times in the past month. That's the concern there. You have Geno Smith, whose 26-point team total is the second highest on this slate. He's facing Arizona's bottom 5 secondary. He has clear stacking options with Tyler Lockett, with DK Metcalf. If you're absolutely crazy, a 1% own, you want to go with Jackson Smith and the Jigba. It's an interesting spot. I think Geno Smith's a top 5 stacking option. But outside of that, I'm not really on Jared Goff this week in a tough matchup with a lower team total. I'm not really on Lamar Jackson this week in a sneaky tough spot. It's a potential shootout environment, but I'm just not on that game compared to Stafford for cheaper, Geno for cheaper, similar price point Justin Herbert. And then after that, I'm not going for these cheaper guys. I'm not getting cute with the Jordan Loves. I'm not getting cute with the Sam Howell, Russell Wilsons. I think there's really just like a core of 5 or 6 quarterbacks this week. We'll break down exactly which quarterbacks and the ownership I have towards them, the stacking rules I'm putting in place, and a whole lot more on the Sunday GPP show on Patreon. Now, some other potential tight ends that you can play, since we've only talked about a few. I think Sam Laporta in a bounce back week. He didn't have a big game, but he did see a season high 11 targets. I think that's a nice option, even in a difficult matchup. And let's scroll a little bit down. I think Pat Freiermuth coming off of the bye week, getting healthier. He's a sneaky option at $3,900. You can put Tyler Higbee in your stacks. We talked about Luke Musgrave, but I want to talk about Michael Mayer, the $2,700 rookie, the second round rookie tight end for the Raiders against the Bears, who allow the second most tight end receptions this year. And here's the deal. Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame, he averaged 8.5 targets per game his final 2 seasons of college. That is elite. In his first 3 weeks of the year, he was used as primarily a blocker. So what's up with that? Well, the answer is maybe he's just a rookie tight end and he had a lot on his plate to learn, because over the last 2 weeks, his usage has increased 44% of the routes, and then 67% of the routes last week led to a 75-yard game. He was targeted 3 times on the opening drives, meaning that he was scripted into the game plan. And now he has that nice matchup against the Bears. Look, he's very cheap, so it's just easy to get into your lineups at 2,700. I am concerned Devontae Adams just gets peppered with targets. Josh Jacobs gets peppered with checkdowns by Aiden O'Connell, but the price point is kind of hard to pass up. So this is what you need to know if you're playing DFS this week. And now if you want even more access to projections, tools, analysis, strategy, and more, well, you can get that in the DFS blueprint with the QR code on the screen, or click the link in the description below. And if you made it to the end of the video, I assume you enjoyed it or found it helpful, so make sure that you're not still one of the 70% of people who are not subscribed to the channel. It helps me out as we push towards 10,000 on this new channel, and it allows you to see my future content.